Welcome back to my channel. I'm Jhonna, and this is Jhonna Unfiltered. Today we're continuing the series on MBTI personality types as narcissistic parents. We already covered INFJ in the last video, and now we're moving on to ENTJ, which is also known as the commander type. Before I go into any of this, the usual disclaimer. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist or a mental health professional. Nothing in this video is a clinical diagnosis of any person or any personality type. This is a learning exploration based on research and observation, and honestly, it's meant to help people understand patterns that might feel familiar from their own lives. If you recognize something here that resonates with your personal experience, please consider speaking with a qualified mental health professional who can actually support you properly. I'm just a curious person making educational content. Also, and I want to be very clear about this, being an ENTJ does not make someone a narcissist. Most ENTJs are not narcissists. This series is specifically exploring what narcissistic behavior might look like when it shows up in a person of each type, because the type shapes the style. It doesn't create the problem. With that said, let's get into it. First, let me explain what ENTJ actually is, for anyone who's new to MBTI. ENTJ stands for extroverted, intuitive, thinking, and judging. People of this type are often described as natural leaders. They're decisive. They're strategic. They think long-term and they move toward their goals with a kind of focused energy that's hard to ignore. They're known for being direct, sometimes very blunt. They value efficiency. They don't particularly enjoy emotional discussions if they feel those discussions aren't leading anywhere productive. And they often have very high standards, both for themselves and for the people around them. In a healthy context, an ENTJ parent can be genuinely excellent. They're the kind of parent who prepares their child for real-world challenges, who sets clear expectations, who teaches discipline and responsibility from early on. They push their kids to grow, not because they're being cruel, but because they genuinely believe that challenge produces strength. When this parent is emotionally healthy, their child benefits from that structure. They learn how to face difficulty, how to problem solve, and how to develop genuine capability. The problem comes when narcissistic patterns are layered on top of those same traits, because then the structure becomes control. The high standards become a conditional relationship, and the efficiency and directness that once felt protective starts to feel like there's no room in the house for anyone's reality except the parents'. Let me explain what that actually looks like in practice. Listen, the most defining feature of a narcissistic ENTJ parent is that the child is treated as a project rather than a person. Not necessarily consciously. The parent might genuinely believe they're doing the right thing. But the love they give is almost entirely performance-based. When the child achieves something, the parent is proud, engaged, and present. When the child fails or struggles, or needs emotional support rather than practical advice, the parent's interest drops. It's not dramatic. It's more like a subtle withdrawal. The child slowly learns that being vulnerable is not safe in this house. That expressing need or difficulty leads to either dismissal or criticism, not comfort. This creates a very specific dynamic that many children of ENTJ narcissistic parents describe when they're older. They often become high achievers because achieving was the primary language of love they were taught. They're often competent, capable, and driven. But underneath that competence is a deep and persistent feeling of not being enough, because no achievement ever quite landed in a way that felt unconditional. The bar always moved. The approval was always just slightly out of reach, right? Let me talk about the mother and father versions separately, because they tend to play out differently. An ENTJ narcissistic mother tends to be extremely involved in her child's life, but in a strategic way. She's not typically the warm, hovering kind of mother. She's the kind who has a plan. She knows what school the child should attend. She knows what career makes sense. She knows what kind of person the child should grow into. And she communicates all of this with a certainty that can feel, to a child, like fact rather than preference. Disagreeing with her doesn't feel like expressing a different opinion. It feels like being wrong. She may also be very image conscious. The family needs to look successful, capable, and functional from the outside. So the child is expected to perform accordingly, not just academically or professionally, but socially as well. Embarrassing the family in public is a significant offense. Struggling in a visible way is not acceptable. And the child carries the weight of representing the family correctly at all times, which honestly is an exhausting role to grow up in. Her emotional style tends toward logic over comfort. When the child is upset, her instinct is to analyze the situation and offer a solution, not to sit with the child and their feelings. To her, this feels like helping. To the child, it often feels like being told their emotions are inconvenient. An ENTJ narcissistic father tends to be more about standards and authority than emotional closeness. He has a vision for what his child should become, and he pursues that vision with the same determination he applies to everything else in his life. The issue is that the child's own preferences and desires don't factor into that vision much, if at all. His relationship with the child is often organized around performance. Good performance earns acknowledgement. Poor performance earns criticism or a kind of cold disappointment that can feel devastating. He doesn't usually soften his feedback because he sees softness as doing the child a disservice. His view is that the world is hard, and he's preparing the child for the world. What he sometimes misses is that the child needs to know they're loved before they can absorb anything else. He's also often a very skilled debater, and believe me, when a child tries to express a different view or push back against his expectations, he can dismantle their arguments so efficiently that the child stops trying. Not because they've been convinced, but because they've learned that expressing disagreement isn't worth the cost. Trust me on that one. Now, let's look at how financial situation changes the dynamic. A wealthy ENTJ narcissistic parent has significant resources available, and those resources tend to become part of the control structure. The child might have access to excellent opportunities, the best schools, travel, material comfort. And those things are real. But they often come with an implicit contract. The resources are provided in exchange for compliance, for performance, and for maintaining the family's image. The child who fails to meet expectations may find that the resources become conditional. Or they may simply grow up feeling that they cannot complain because they've been given so much. This silences genuine pain in a very effective way because the child doesn't feel they have the right to be unhappy. A financially struggling ENTJ narcissistic parent shifts the dynamic in a different direction. Without material resources as leverage, this parent often uses struggle itself as the currency of control. The message becomes, look at everything I've sacrificed. Look at how hard I've worked. The implication is that the child owes a debt that can only be repaid through success. This creates enormous pressure, but it also creates confusion because the child can see the parent's genuine effort and can't fully separate the real sacrifice from the emotional manipulation that uses that sacrifice as a tool. The alcoholic or substance-dependent version of this parent type is particularly destabilizing. ENTJs in a healthy state are known for their control, their decisiveness, their structured approach to problems. When alcohol or substances enter the picture, that control becomes unreliable. And for a child who's organized their behavior around predicting what the parent wants, that unpredictability is genuinely frightening. The parent who is calm and strategic when sober becomes someone different when impaired. The precision that normally characterizes their criticism becomes brutality because their natural bluntness loses whatever filter it normally operates with. And then the next day, there's often a version of accountability or justification that the child doesn't quite know what to do with because it doesn't undo what happened. Let me talk about what the children of this type of parent tend to carry with them. They often become extraordinarily competent adults. They learned early that capability was the price of being valued, and they paid it. They're often high achievers, skilled at presenting well, and capable of functioning under pressure in ways that other people find impressive. But inside, they often struggle with a persistent sense that their value is always contingent on their output. That if they stopped being productive, stopped achieving, stopped performing, they would stop being loved. Not just by this parent, but by anyone. They also often struggle with perfectionism in a way that goes deeper than just wanting to do things well. It's more like a fear of what happens if they don't. They're sensitive to criticism, especially from authority figures, because criticism in their childhood came with emotional consequences. And they may find it genuinely difficult to receive care or support without immediately wondering what's expected of them in return. One of the most important things I want to say before I close is this. If you grew up with a parent like the one I've described today, your experience was real. The part of them that was genuinely capable and driven was real. The part that caused harm was also real. You don't have to choose between those truths. You're allowed to hold both at the same time. And believe me, you're allowed to build limits and distance and a life that's shaped by your own values, not by the version of you that your parent decided you should become. That's not betrayal. That's survival. And eventually it's healing. Before I close, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had a parent or a significant person in your life who expressed care mainly through pushing for achievement? And how did that shape the way you see yourself? Drop it in the comments if you're comfortable. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Thanks for watching. If this video resonated with you, please consider hitting the subscribe button. I want to be upfront and share that I use this text-to-speech voice to tell my stories because as a full-time ESL teacher, I have to be very careful with my vocal cords. Managing vocal nodules means I have to save my voice for my students, but I didn't want that to stop me from sharing these unfiltered thoughts with you. I'm Jhonna, and I'm currently working toward my goal of 1,000 subscribers so I can finally monetize this channel and turn this passion into a sustainable part of my future. This is my diary of solo living here in the Philippines, and your support, whether through a comment or a sub, helps me keep this channel growing. If you would like to help out even more, you can check out the Buy a Treat for My Pets link in the description. My dogs definitely appreciate the love. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the next update. Thank you for being such an important part of this journey. I'm Jhonna, and I will see you in the next one.